Okay, we'll get started. Hi everyone, welcome back again to Light Up Virtual Conference. This is the second session on track two, and today we have Ian Choi from Microsoft APAC region, and we'll be talking on open sources and development environment. Thanks, Ian Choi, for joining us on this event and making up time for this and giving up for a cause which is in support of UNICEF. We all welcome you into this event. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Choi. I work in actually Korea in APEC region in Microsoft. And today, then I would like to talk about open sources and development environment. So then, as you know, then Microsoft now emphasize lots of open source things. So that I want to bring this topic today to audiences. Before going further, then I would like to mention again, then please donate if you are very okay and if you really would like to support COVID-19 for many children. And also then thanks a lot also for lots of sponsors for the event. And then this is the feedback page on my speaking and also general event feedback. So please to share your feedback. It will be very great. So then I work in Korea as a part of developer relations team, and then my main role is to work with many developer communities in Korea and also APEC area. For example, like Singapore, New Zealand, and also Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and so on. There are many countries in APEC, so but due to COVID-19, then I could not travel a lot. Instead, I'm happily joined with this kind of online event. And today, then I would like to talk by dividing into three different topics. One is how Microsoft has has evolving with open sources, and second one is that I would like to some highlight which kind of open source things were emphasized on last build 2020. And third thing is that I would like to demonstrate or show that how AI world is evolving with open sources and also development environment. And then first of all, then let's start with Microsoft and open sources. And this is the statistics for recent few years. So then still then many people think that when Microsoft started to publicly available to cloud services like Azure, and then many people still many people think that then there are many Windows-based machines, Windows server machines, but as time goes, it is now wrong. Currently, then this is the some statistics which were disclosed on Linux.org, Linux kernel mailing list, and then on June 2019, then the ratio of Linux operating systems on the top of Azure is more than 50%. So it means that now Microsoft really loves Linux. As Satya said, and then initially said that Microsoft loves Linux. Nobody, almost no small number of people believed, because then in 2000, and then the previous CEO Steve Ballmer said that Linux is like a cancer, but today it is completely wrong. Then now Azure is supports more Linux operating systems than Windows-based operating systems like Windows 10 or Windows servers. So, which means that Microsoft really loves open sources. So then this is some recent progress on Microsoft. So then actually then before Satya became CEO, and then Microsoft also had been supporting lots of open source technologies like TypeScript and also many other open source technologies using Codeplex. But however, then after Satya officially became CEO, and then some motions like Microsoft loves Linux, and also then Microsoft really loves open sources and developers. Such motions were more driven. So, for example, then in 2014, then actually the Microsoft created GitHub organization on GitHub, and also then Microsoft officially supported and created .NET Foundation, which means that Microsoft wanted to move .NET to work with more open source communities. Previously, then .NET is still that there are .NET and .NET Core, and .NET is currently still on Microsoft product, while .NET Core is completely open source. But .NET is still evolving with working with open source communities. And in 2015, then Visual Studio Code is released. Visual Studio Code is one of break news from Microsoft because the first of all, the Microsoft still releases Visual Studio, for example, Visual Studio 2019. But however, then Visual Studio Code is also being developed using open source technologies. For example, then Visual Studio Code is based on Electron, which is very popular to open source developers. And also then all the sources are open to GitHub. And everyone can download and see how Visual Studio Code is implemented, or that anyone can contribute to enhance Visual Studio Code functionalities, or then even then anyone can develop extensions on the top of Visual Studio Code. And also then lots of open source initiatives and activities have been done from Microsoft. For example, the Microsoft announced HD Insight. HD Insight is hardware plus a kind of hardware Ubuntu. And also Microsoft jointly forms Node.js Foundation. And in 2016, then .NET Core 1.0 was released. And also another break news was that Windows Subsystem for Linux in Windows 10 were released for developers, which means that on Windows still then there are many PowerShell users, but however then still today then we might need to admit that there are also relatively many Linux-based developers, for example, using shell script. So then those people are quite familiar with Linux operating systems, while then they are still struggling with executing using command on CMD console or then PowerShell console. So this is very break news, and then Microsoft really would like to collaborate with Linux developers. And also the Microsoft joined Linux Foundation, then Microsoft officially is recognized as top open source contributor on GitHub. And also then there are more activities like Azure Kubernetes Service based on completely open source Kubernetes was launched. And also Microsoft officially said that Microsoft officially contribute to lots of projects on top of Kubernetes. And also the SQL Server on Linux was released in 2017. And Windows source code was moved to Git based. And also then in 2018, another breaking news was that Microsoft announced that Microsoft would acquire GitHub. It is also great news. And today, then more than 5,000 Microsoft employees are committing to open source projects on GitHub. It is also very good news. So then today, then I'm using Windows 10. Then when I search Linux on Windows App Store, and then I could see lots of many interesting widgets. Like this is Ubuntu, this is Kali Linux, this is Ubuntu 2024 and Ubuntu 18 or Debian, SUSE Linux, or many Linux distributions. And also then the below picture was very interesting for me. Because I first saw this picture in 2016 or 17, which means that Microsoft really would like to collaborate with Red Hat. So this could come from strong partnership, enterprise partnership between Microsoft and Red Hat, which is very strong. And also then the right picture is a recent article on May or June. And then this says that Brad Smith is one of senior leadership team members in Microsoft Corp. And then he says that Microsoft were completely wrong about open source in 2000. So now that Microsoft really loves open sources, and also that on GitHub homepage, you can find many customer stories, and also including Microsoft. So if you are interested in these customer stories, then please go to github.com/customer-stories/Microsoft. And then, or you can search via Google or Bing. So then it is very interesting because there are many developers in Microsoft. First, they are still using Microsoft products for source version controls on, for example, Team Foundation servers, but they now moved to many repositories are now moved to GitHub-based repositories. And Visual Studio Code is very great. It is currently the most popular open source IDE, integrated development environment. So this is the statistics from Stack Overflow last year. And then according to this, and then Visual Studio Code is on the top of the most popular development environment. And also then on Microsoft VS Code GitHub repository, then there are many stars and forks. Also, then you can say or share any issues, or even you can contribute to your source code and make a pull request. Finally, then I would like to mention that Microsoft would like to collaborate with many developer communities globally. For example, then this is KubeCon 2019, where many container-based developers are. So the Microsoft sponsored as one of top sponsors, and also on PyCon US 2020. And then actually then this event was completely held in online because due to COVID-19. So then PyCon US organizers shared on Twitter or many social medias that they are struggling with financial problems because they canceled offline event, and then they need some really require sponsorship. So Microsoft decided to sponsor as keynote sponsor. So the Microsoft really would like to collaborate with many developer communities. I'm really happy as one of the employees in Microsoft, who see that Microsoft is truly working with developer communities. And also then for the second topic, let's move to the second topic. And then I would like to highlight some Build 2020 things. First of all, then Build 2020 was held on last May 19 to 20, according to US time zone. And then when you see the poster on the left and right, and then left poster is on Build 2020, while right poster is for Build 2019. When you see on the right slide and design, and it seems that it is a kind of very nice design and then very calm design. So for offline attendees, it would imply that for offline developers, please join in Microsoft Build. You might see lots of developers environment through offline during keynote or other activities. While then on the left poster, you might see that this is fully led with digital. So then please join in digital event. And actually then this build event on last May was held really for 48 hours without no break, like this Lightup Summit. because Lightup Summit is currently happening for 24 hours, which is very great. So the opening for 48 hours would mean that many speakings are still happening for 48 hours. And then Microsoft thought that there can be 3 different time zones. One is US-based time zone, and the second one is Asia-based time zone, and the third one is Europe-based time zone. So then some keynote speakings were duplicated for Asia time zones and also Europe time zones. And then while then some local speakers from Asia region or Europe region also participated in as one of speakers, which was very great. And also then all the events were connected for totally for 48 hours, like this Lightup conference. So then it was really great. And then let's see then how open source activities were emphasized during last build. Actually, then this picture is one of my favorite scenes during last build 2020. Then there have been many open source related activities announced, but however, then this thing is very great for me because then on the top of Windows 10, then Linux is operating. Actually, then Windows subsystem for Linux, sometimes we can say the WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and this was first announced on around 2016, which were about 4 to 5 years ago. And at the time that I was really shocked because on Windows and previously when I would like to use Linux, then I needed to install virtual machines on the top of Windows, like with using Hyper-V or VirtualBox or VMware. And then I need to install Linux, so that there were performance degradation, and also then some files on the Windows-based folders and Linux-based folders were not compatible. So that I needed copy and paste to some files, and then I need to compile on virtual machines using Linux environment, and then I need to copy again to Windows-based environment, and so on. But now the Windows subsystem for Linux is very great because the file system is being shared. Although the detailed file system management on Linux and Windows are a little bit different, because then on Windows and then files are managing with basically four different attributes. ARHS. A is archive or active, or then R is read only, and H is hidden, and S is system. While then on Linux and then files permissions are managed using read, write, and executable for owners, groups, and also other users. So while on Windows-based environment and then currently, then many people are using NTFS-based file systems, and then Windows now supports very fine-grained permissions. So yeah, it was very great, and then I will demonstrate something if someone are still not familiar with Windows subsystem for Linux. And during last build 2020, then some GUI stuff were emphasized. For example, the opening GIMP GIMP application on the top of Windows using Linux subsystem. And also the Windows Terminal were announced officially as 1.0 version. So this was also really great. And then Windows Terminal, previously then someone are still very familiar with this screen. This is a command prompt, and then we usually execute this thing using CMD. But however, then no tab is supported, and also there are basic customization. For example, then when I click default properties, and then I could change very basic colors. So then there are not enough functionalities for recent users who are familiar with command line based environment, especially for developers. But now the Windows terminal is very great. For example, then let me show one Windows terminal. And then this is current Windows terminal. And then I can execute, for example, command prompt and also Windows PowerShell. And then as you see, then this screen is black based and gray colors for fonts. But however, then this screen is based on something different color. So I can customize some themes by going to settings, and also then I can customize by creating some more tabs, and also then I can also integrate with Azure Cloud Shell, which works directly with Azure Cloud, which is very great. Okay, then let's move to the next thing. And then also then on last build 2020, and then GitHub is again emphasized. So Satya on the keynote, Satya emphasized that there are so many developers in 2020 on GitHub. Then there are 50 million developers on GitHub. Those statistics were very higher than last year. Last year, then Satya mentioned that there were about 36 million developers, but now then GitHub, Satya says that on GitHub there are 50 million developers. So more developers are still coming on GitHub, which is very great. And also then Satya emphasized developer productivity, even for remote developers. So then this is one of interesting thing. So this is code space, and the code space means that Visual Studio Code can be executed on the top of cloud on Azure, not only on Azure, but also on the top of GitHub. So then there are currently two different versions. One is Visual Studio Code Spaces, which is on the top of Azure, and then you can go to Visual Studio Code Spaces webpage and then just create code space virtual machine to manage Visual Studio Code on the top of virtual machines. And since Visual Studio Code were developed, have been developed using Electron, and then it surely supports web browser-based functionalities. So the code space is now operating on the top of web browsers. And so yeah, let me demonstrate these code spaces. And then this is Visual Studio Code Space. So then you might see then this is web browser. This is a web browser. So while then, let me see. So okay, I will execute separately on Visual Studio Code. And then this is a my Visual Studio Code application on the top of Windows. So currently, then it is executed on the top of Windows, my laptop. While then this Visual Studio Code space is running on the top of web browsers. And then it is actually hosted on online.visualstudio.com. So the how to do that, then you can just go to online Visual Studio Code Spaces webpage and then create a instance. And then it require and then you can do a seamless development environment. For example, that this kind of command palette is very well supported on the top of Visual Studio Code Spaces, and also even then you can open. For example, click this and then code space using connect to code space. Although some extensions would be needed, and then you can connect to code space and then connect this code space. This is already connected to code space because I opened using web browser. And then while then this is another example, so let me reconnect again. This is interesting because then the URL is on the top of github.com. So which means that this is another version of code spaces supported by GitHub. So since Visual Studio Code is open source, and then GitHub additionally invested some continuous integrated environment integrating with GitHub repositories and code spaces. So since it is loading, so it takes some time. But however, then you might see that this is Visual Studio or online Visual Studio Code Spaces available on the top of Azure, while then this is currently the preview for on the top of GitHub. But however, this is hosted on GitHub. How to that? And then when you join in GitHub code space preview, and then you might click some your preferred repositories, like for example code space test repo, and then usually then you can clone using this URL. But however, then when you join in the preview program, then you can click this open code spaces, and then you can also create a new code space. But however, that I already created one code space. So when I click this, and then it loads on the top of your web browser. So which means that repositories are many synced and using code spaces, and you can develop in details on your source code, and then change and then make a commit or make commit or pull request, which is really great. And then even you go back to your home, or then even you are using your iPad or Galaxy Tab, and then you can continuously develop without changing your development environment context. For example, then it is very true that when I switch my laptop, so I'm using both my MacBook Pro plus Surface Book 2. But however, then sometimes then I need to bring MacBook, or the other times then I need to bring Surface Book. So in that case, and then some development environment are actually not synced together. So using this, then all the development environment should be same. So then it is really great to work seamlessly, which is very great. And so then this is the screenshot on Visual Studio Code, and then there are so many extensions. So please check more extensions as much as possible. It is very great. And also then there were some Azure static web apps were emphasized during last build 2020. It is also really great because then previously, then when you would like to integrate pull request or commit with CI and CD, and then some build web pages would be needed. So, for example, then these static web pages would require basic login functionalities. For example, only authenticated users would see, or then there can be some basic login or basic functionalities to interact with backend. So now the Azure static web apps are really great because it supports to create and or to integrate with static web apps on your pull request or commit. And then on the front end, it will be hosted on the top of Azure static web apps, while then some backend functionalities are very synced with Azure serverless functions. And then you can easily check especially for front-end developers, and then it is a little bit difficult for them to see whether local changes are really reflected to cloud, and then so they really want to see check using web browsers. In that case, then static web apps would be really great because it integrates with commit and pull request. So for any kind of commit or pull request, and then the front web page developers can easily check using static web apps, and then see whether there are still bugs, or bugs are well resolved, or there are still other bugs, many bugs or other bugs like this way. And finally, then DynaCore was emphasized on last build, which is very good. So then on upcoming November, then it is supposed that there will be .NET 5. It will be a combined version between .NET 4. .NET Framework 4.8 plus .NET Core 3. So, and then I really expect this thing on upcoming November. So, but on last build, and then .NET Core 3.1 were emphasized as it is a kind of long-term support edition, so that you can assure that this version is staying for many years. And then there are also many kind of other functionalities like self-contained executables and also the modern web UIs with the ASP.NET Blazor like this way. So then next, I would like to emphasize that how AI world is evolving with open source and developer environment. So this is the recent history for AI world area. So then when you see, especially for AI world, and then you might notice that open sources are really inevitable to work with AI domain. For example, then when deep learning first appeared, and then deep learning was first demonstrated on many research contests. For example, like ResNet or many other contests, and then Theano were used as a type of open sources to implement with AI or machine learnings or using deep learning functionalities. And now then there are also many open sources, but currently then it seems that TensorFlow and also PyTorch, two open sources are now very popular, and also Keras is very popular. While then other open sources like initial Theano or Torch were replaced as PyTorch, but however Cafe or the other open sources are not too much popular as current popular open sources, AI open sources like TensorFlow, Keras, and also PyTorch. And Microsoft also first released CNTK, Computational Network Toolkit, on April 2015. And also then this were evolved as Microsoft Cognitive Toolkit on January 2016. But however, then currently then Microsoft really would like to work with open sources, and then Microsoft supports not only TensorFlow but also Keras and PyTorch on the top of Azure using data science virtual machines. And also then Microsoft is now emphasizing more on Onyx. Onyx is a project for AI interoperability. For example, then still then some AI developers are using TensorFlow while other AI developers are using PyTorch. They really would like to collaborate together. Onyx has two goals. One goal is to resolve AI interoperability using different frameworks and or hardware. And the second one is that how the performance would be higher using Onyx. So then Microsoft is contributing more on Onyx, and then it is now one of graduate projects in Linux Foundation AI. And there are many machine learning and developer tools on the top of Azure, but I would like to emphasize now 4 things. One is Visual Studio Code, which I already explained, and the second one is Azure Notebooks. When you go to notebook.azure.com, then you might see that you don't have to install any kind of Jupyter notebook on your local environment. Instead, then you can experience Jupyter notebooks on the top of Azure without installation by going to notebook.azure.com. And also, then command line would be very important. And also, the Microsoft supports many popular frameworks like PyTorch, TensorFlow, Scikit-learn, or Onyx. And then this could be a type of Microsoft powerful infrastructure using by supporting CPUs, not only CPUs but also GPUs or FPGA. And also then there are many Microsoft-based Azure services, like not only machine learning virtual machines, but also Azure machine learning services, which support very well and on AutoML, plus CI/CD integration using Azure DevOps and so on. And of course, and then Microsoft provides domain-specific pre-trained models. For example, computer visions is very great. And so those are 4 screenshots. One is Jupyter Notebook. So that you can go to notebook.azure.com and then you can easily execute Jupyter Notebook without any installation on your local environment. On the right picture is that when you use Visual Studio Code, and then I'm executing Visual Studio Code, and then you can go to these extensions, and then you can find Python extension. Python extension is very great because then it supports with great functionalities by integrating with many things on your Visual Studio Code environment. And even then, it supports to open Jupyter Notebook files. And also, then if you install Jupyter Notebook on your local environment, and if you specify the URL or endpoint for Jupyter Notebook, and then you can connect with Jupyter Notebook, and then when you execute on the top of Visual Studio Code, and then it will be executed on the top of actually Jupyter Notebook. So then using one ID, Visual Studio Code, then you can work 100% with Jupyter Notebook. And the third one is the screenshot of how Microsoft Azure supports AIs by supporting lots of many architectures. You might see on some documents on reference architectures on docs.microsoft.com for not only for machine learning AI, but also other domains. And finally, screenshot is actually I took this screenshot in Korean, but however, then this screenshot is for data science virtual machines. And also then on last build, and then actually then WSL2 were announced. WSL2 is a new version. So then when I go to this terminal again, and then one interesting thing is that this is on the top of WSL2, and then so one great thing is that this is my this is my Docker desktop application. So I installed Docker desktop, and then now that it directly supports to use WSL2 based engine. So then, for example, then this is my Linux environment, and then for example, then when I execute Docker PS, and then actually then this command, when I execute this Docker command, and then the result is actually on this Docker desktop application. So the Docker is now hosted on Docker desktop application on my laptop, and then this Docker command is completely synced with this Docker desktop environment, which means that there have been performance advantages on Docker. Not only this, and then although it was not implemented on last build on last May, but however, then on June, and let's first say that on last May, then WSL2 plus GPU were announced. So then not only Microsoft pages. Then, for example, this is from Microsoft page as far as I know. And then on Microsoft page, and WSL will support GPU computer workflows like Nvidia CUDA plus DirectML, which is the version, the next versions for DirectX for machine learning developers. So then those two were announced, and at the same time, the Nvidia announced that some additional functionalities to support WSL2 will be released as preview very soon. So then when you see this small demo video, and then on the top of WSL2, then you can execute machine learning scenario, and then actually then this is using GPUs on TensorFlow on the top of WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. So then, also then, as I said, the Nvidia also announced that this is now public preview. So then you can download and execute, and then this is the web page. Yeah, this is the web page on Nvidia developer.nvidia.com/CUDA.wsl. Then it explains in very details on the architecture or technologies on the how to support GPUs on the top of Windows Subsystem for Linux. And then you might read more details. Just one thing I would like to mention is that it is currently for preview purpose, which means that it requires you to join in Microsoft Windows Insider program, which means that your Windows 10 would be converted for evaluation purpose for developers, and then you can additionally install WSL2 related environment to better support Nvidia GPUs. So then it will be really great if you try this. And then currently, then just one note, it is still on preview. So performance, there are still issues on performances, and then which I hope that this thing will be enhanced very soon. And so, and then and this is also Microsoft AI. So then even when you go to azure.microsoft.com and or by searching Azure Face API on your mobile app, mobile web browser, and then you can go to this site, and then you can upload any kind of pictures by specifying image URL, or then you can upload some images with your camera, photo camera or photo folder. And then you might see that this is perceived emotion recognition, then happiness is 100% like this way. So then this is achieved using open source technologies mixed with Azure Cloud. And then this thing is then how Microsoft thinks regarding AI. So Microsoft really considers that for AI, then trustworthy is very important. So AI should be responsible on machine learning. So then this is also built 2020 highlight, and then Microsoft really would like to support whether your AI model is biased or not. For example, female and male problems or black and white issues are very serious. So then we might need to see with your great not unbiased view. So which is very important. So then Microsoft Azure now supports very well then how to evaluate and how to observe, monitor such biased views. And finally, then I would like to mention one additional thing. So this is on WSL2, and then, for example, this is my source repository, which means that currently my C drive is well mounted on this Ubuntu environment, and then this is Ubuntu environment, and when I go to etc issues, and then it, oh, sorry. The command has been changed. This is for Ubuntu 18, and this is for Ubuntu 2000, Ubuntu 20. So then, when I execute code, that code space at that, and then it opens Visual Studio Code on the top of Windows. And which means that although I'm using WSL2 environment, using this command line. However, then this is open using Windows environment, and then this is actually on the top of WSL. So which means that when you debug or execute your own command on this, and then actually then the execution is happening on the top of WSL, not on the Windows. Of course, then you can switch on Windows-based environment. For example, reopen folder in Windows. So for example, then when I go to terminal, then currently then this is Linux-based terminal environment. But however, when I switch to reopen folder in Windows, and then it goes to Windows-based environment. So now then it is on my command line prompt environment using on the top of Windows. So like this way, then Microsoft really would like to collaborate with open sources, including Linux Linux environment, also then GitHub, open source developers, and so on. So Microsoft is very welcome to every developers, and then such messages were very well emphasized in last build 2020. So if you are interested in more resources, then please go to mybuild.microsoft.com to see many interesting build sessions. So then Microsoft is still evolving with Azure. So Azure is Microsoft hopes that Azure really supports all of you to invent with your own purpose. Okay, thanks a lot for listening to my presentation, and this is the end of my presentation. Hope that you are more aware on open sources on Microsoft. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for providing this wonderful insights on the session. So thanks for joining in, and thanks for taking up this time of your schedule to provide us this insights. Thank you.
Thank you.